And everybody, welcome to the Ingram Angle from Washington. Famed feminist attorney Lisa Bloom shooting the messenger, blaming a far-right journalist for busting her case. That's apparently after she was caught red-handed soliciting funds for those accusing Donald Trump of sexual misconduct. And that supposedly far-right journalist is actually well-respected reporter John Solomon of The Hill, used to work at the AP. He's going to be here to give his side of the story. But first, the left's hyperbole and hypocrisy regarding criticism of Bob Mueller and the FBI. That's the focus of tonight's angle. Critics of the president and this channel are howling that we're putting the country in danger. So what's our crime? Accurately reporting the alarming bias within special counsel Bob Mueller's investigation. Despite the fact that Mueller and his team have unearthed no evidence of so-called collusion between Trump and Russia, the left considers it, basically it's a crime to even raise legitimate questions about the staffing and the tactics of the Mueller investigation. And they're now going into full-on apoplexy.
This has been a months-long, orchestrated, frankly pathetic, and also dangerous attack.
It's a real example of the divide in the country and how conservative media is fueling that divide right now.
They are fomenting a constitutional crisis. Yes. What they are doing could lead to violence.
Oh, really, Joe? Come on, even you don't believe that. So let's get this straight. The Democrat smear machine can run 24/7 maligning President Trump. They use innuendo and anonymous leaks, but the special counsel is beyond reproach. They have their billionaires like Tom Steyer launching these absurd impeachment efforts on TV. They have Hollywood infecting their programming with tedious anti-Trump vitriol. And who knows how many congressmen and senators are now demanding the president's resignation. Yet they want us to tone it down? And they want us to, refrain from exposing the rank conflict presented by current members of the Mueller team? People like Jeannie Rhee and Andrew Weissman, we can't mention them? In their warped worldview, you can call for a president who, by the way, oversees the FBI, to step aside because of decades-old allegations, but we can't call for the resignation of Deputy FBI Director Andrew McCabe, who's at the heart of this entire mess? Oh, isn't that nifty? It's like heads you win, tails we lose. Nice try. We have every right to report on the abuse of power within any agency of government, a principle Democrats used to favor. Indeed, if anyone has attacked law enforcement unfairly over the years, it's the Democrats and their enablers in the media. Who can forget fanning the flames in St. Louis or Baltimore? This is the same media who denigrated law enforcement officers for years in defense of social justice warriors and false narratives.
When we equip police with all these powers and no training, that doesn't just affect one segment of the community, that impacts everybody.
Let's make that clear. The city's not burning because of these protesters. The city is burning because the police killed Freddie Gray.
I do not trust this. Oh, they're bad, so they must have done something wrong and they deserve what they had coming rationale, which is the same one we hear from the CIA as we hear from police in a case like Michael Brown. Our hearts are out there marching with them.
They never challenged the lie of hands up, don't shoot. And remember, they lapped up the false narrative that the police killed Freddie Gray. It was all a crock. It was all done to cast aspersions on police and empathize with certain minority activists. Law enforcement did not get the benefit of the doubt in those cases, and oftentimes that is the case with them. So no, I'm not dissuaded for a nanosecond by their phony claims of shock and dismay over conservatives who have the temerity to challenge Bob Mueller, Jim Comey, and Andrew McCabe. And let's not forget what the president said last week about the rank and file of that very agency of the FBI.
When you return home to your local precincts, I want you to deliver a message to your fellow officers. The President of the United States has your back 100%.
Yeah, definitely sounds like he and his followers don't support the FBI. Look, the fact is, what the left is really irked about, let's be honest here, is that the president is actually following through on his major promises. And by the way, we saw this today with the announcement of our new American security strategy. Henceforth, we will use a principled realism to deal with our allies and our adversaries. We see China now for what it is. It's a state-run power aggressively seeking global dominance. We'll work with them when they can, but we have our eyes wide open. Same with Russia. Although, let's face it, they have an economy smaller than France's. It's not quite China. Our approach to the world now will be consistently grounded in our America First ideal. It's a total, complete repudiation of Obama's citizen of the world claptrap that we heard about so often for his 8 years. So no wonder the left is totally unhinged. Soaring economy, tax reform about to pass, confidence high, ISIS smashed, deportations up, foreign policy refocused. And no, we are not tired of winning, but as we do so, we will continue to ask uncomfortable questions at times about Bob Mueller's team or any other part of the government where corruption might lie. It's our job, and that's the angle. And now for a deeper look into what's really going on in the Mueller investigation, the Wall Street Journal's Kim Strassel joins us from Alaska. Wow, Kim. Good for you. And here in the studio, former FBI Assistant Director Ron Hosko. Ron, let's start with you. What did I get right? What did I get wrong?
Well, I think that you got a lot right. On many levels, the president is succeeding, and I certainly believe that that the media is right to shed a light and raise questions that I think are legitimate questions about whether Bob Mueller is running an unbiased, fair, responsible investigation. Those are fair questions to ask, given the background of some of the attorneys that have staffed that group.
And he makes a distinction, Ron, between the rank-and-file officers of the FBI. You can see his love for the law enforcement, whether it's police, first responders, firefighters, or the FBI. And the leadership, which at times, I think in this case, has made judgments in hiring that have been ill-advised, at the very least.
Well, look, Bob Mueller has the right to hire the team of his choosing. However, raising questions and looking at the composition of that team, I think, is entirely legitimate, because at the end of the day, what you want is an unbiased investigation. The light is going to shine in. We are going to have an understanding, and what has happened, what we saw on text exchanges between a lead FBI investigator and an FBI attorney.
Peter Strzok and Lisa Page.
Right. Those raise legitimate questions. They certainly are embarrassing to the workforce over there. And look, the FBI knows, the rank and file know, and the senior leadership knows that your personal biases can never infect your work. We all have certain biases. We all have proclivities, but you can't let it infect the work.
Kim, let's go to you. You've been reporting extensively on this. The apoplectic response by the left for these legitimate questions, as Ron referenced, as a former FBI man himself, assistant director, they're over the top. And this from Democrats who have routinely questioned law enforcement across the country in the most vicious ways, frankly, oftentimes unfounded.
Look, I think the depth and the range of that complaint about him and the attacks on him are a signal of Democratic realization of how big a problem Bob Mueller has created for himself. Because let's be clear, Bob Mueller has done this to himself. Nobody else. It's not the conservative media. I think a lot of us out there, and myself included, when he was first appointed, we were hopeful. We wanted to know. I still want to know. Is there anything improper or illegal about Trump transition team or campaign team ties to the Russians? But I think a lot of people also expected that he was going to look into what really happened last year, what happened within the FBI. And we're coming to the realization that not only is the team that is working for him incapable of looking into those issues because they're the people who stand accused, as it were, but they may have biases that prohibit them from fairly looking at the Trump team and what happened. And he's done this to himself by choosing them and then by not coming clean when he found out himself what was going on.
I think the Wall Street Journal writer who I think originally wrote about this today, Kim, said, Well, no, they talked about an insurance policy, they were essentially trying to help Trump. Did you see that reference today on Twitter? There was like a 14-tweet long chain, which Brit Hume and I were howling about on Twitter. We're like, oh, okay, so he was actually trying to help Trump with this insurance policy. I couldn't follow that, I have to confess.
Well, there's a lot of theories getting thrown out there right now about how you could possibly explain this, because it looks very, very bad. But here's the reality, Laura. We're not going to know until the FBI actually puts this guy forward to be interviewed by Congress. And again, I think this gets to the problem that Mueller has. They wanted to interview him months ago, and the FBI has continued to refuse to make him available. They kept those texts hidden, and so did the Mueller team. That does not inspire confidence by anyone. If Bob Mueller had cared about the credibility of what he was doing when he demoted this guy back in July, he'd have gone to Congress, who clearly has an interest in this, told him what was going on, and said, look, I dealt with the problem. That's not what happened.
Ron, this is what Andy McCarthy said today on my radio show. He was talking about the initial decision to recuse himself by Jeff Sessions. Mm-hmm. Let's listen.
I give him a 1 on how he's performed in connection with the Russia stuff. His recusal on Russia was way too broad, including giving Mueller a warrant to investigate this thing that has absolutely no limits, and that has become just the fishing expedition that people like me complained it was going to be.
So he gave Sessions a 1 out of 10, and the handling of this thing, and most everything else, he's been fantastic. Right. But this was a mistake from the beginning. No evidence of a crime, yet a limitless supply of lawyers, money, and time.
Yeah, there's a couple things that give me faith in Bob Mueller and in the outcome of this investigation. Like Kimberly, I want to know too. One, I worked for Bob Mueller. I think he's a person of high integrity. He's a patriot. Two, the sun will shine in on this investigation. The results will tell us what did he find. It could well be, and we haven't seen him get close to the president yet, could well be that he finds nothing, that he's found some other lower level criminality by Mike Flynn, who's pled guilty, by Paul Manafort, who's been charged, and a couple of others. But because this is going to play out in the U.S. courts, we're going to get to see what the evidence is. We're going to get to see the strength of the evidence.
It's not going to play out in the U.S. courts regarding the president. That's not how it works. It's going to be impeached or not. It's not going to play out in the U.S. courts.
I'm talking about these collateral players.
Well, by Manafort, but that's not close to what the president was about. The Manafort stuff, I don't see how that has any relevance. Kim, the Manafort trial that will come up this year, perhaps, I mean, I'm not seeing any evidence so far that that's connected to anything really close to the president at all.
No, I mean, this is part of the disillusionment, I think, with the Mueller probe, is people were hoping that he was going to go in and we'd somehow get the story of what happened in 2016. People are now being reminded that's never what happens when you have a special prosecutor. We've got these lower level crimes. They somehow cast suspicion on the Trump team, but they don't tell us anything because they're not crimes that are in any way related to what the original charges were: obstruction, collusion, etc. And, you know, I'd have been much happier if Bob Mueller, in the way of finding these things along the way, referred them back to the Justice Department to handle and simply have decided, is there collusion, is there obstruction? If not, close up shop and then let the regular
not a crime.
Justice
As Andy McCarthy keeps saying, and as Andy McCarthy keeps saying, collusion, there is not a crime in actually speaking to Russian officials during an election cycle. That's like another thing that people keep repeating. That's not in the Federal Register as a crime. So the underpinning of this investigation from the beginning, from Sessions recusing himself, which I think was a huge mistake, to the naming of Rod Rosenstein as Deputy Attorney General, to Rod Rosenstein calling a special counsel, those are cataclysmic decisions. And I think those are going to go down as not smart decisions in the end. But great to see both of you. Thank you so much. And by the way, guys, a famed feminist attorney is accused of offering women payments who made accusations against Donald Trump. She's going after that reporter who broke the story. He's going to defend himself up next. Stay there.